Well, I felt like something was going to happen. So I think in these situations, you always sing with your eyes open. And so I always think about when I come into hostile environments, hey, I should keep my eyes open. So I saw a guy who was clearly not a church person run down the aisle, a big fat guy in white, with really angry. He took the smoke bombs out of his pockets and lit them on the side inside of the church during mid-worship song, and then chucked them right at my head. I dodged them, thankfully. I'm so proud of the church here. They didn't stop for a minute. You know, of course, the police just watched. Not something you normally see in church. Hopefully this is not the norm in Canada in 2025. We're not going to be threatened. You know, we're not going to be cornered. We're not going to be afraid. This is a different type of church that's happening right now.
That's the voice of Sean Feucht, the American performer who, during his swing through Canada on a summer concert tour, found one after the other that venues were turning their back on him, saying that they were canceling his bookings because he had become controversial, the fact he was performing here, and controversial largely because of his beliefs, some of them religious, some of them religious based, but others political. He's known as a rising star in the MAGA movement. He ran as a Republican at, I believe it was the state level a few years back. And he has said some controversial things about the LGBTQ plus community and some things about abortion that didn't go down well in certain quarters. Here in Montreal, a church in the Plateau offered to host him last Friday after his venue in Quebec City canceled on him. And the city of Montreal didn't much like that and went to the church, tried to tell the church it didn't have the proper permit to have this performance. And then after the performance took place, informed the church it was going to be fined $2,500. Well, there is an organization here in Quebec called the Quebec Evangelical Network, which doesn't much like that and is accusing the city of Montreal of censorship. In studio with me, Jean-Christophe Jasmin, External Affairs Director at the Quebec Evangelical Network. Jean-Christophe, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What was your reaction when you heard that the city of Montreal was saying that Sean Feucht should not be bringing his show to Montreal because it wasn't in keeping with Montreal values?
I have to say I was not surprised, unfortunately. This seems like a redux of what happened to Quebec in Quebec City 2 years ago, where there was an evangelical conference in the Quebec Convention Center that was suddenly canceled by the Minister of Tourism after they visited their website and saw their position on abortion issues. So unfortunately, it is not that surprising, but it is really concerning.
The church has been told $1,500 fine for holding an event without the proper permit. I believe it's your position that they didn't need a permit for that performance.
Well, clearly you see that there is a lack of capacity to understand religious expression. You see it in the media coverage, in some media coverage where it's described that a priest did a speech when it's a pastor. It's obviously a pastor in an evangelical church. So it's not surprising that the city can confuse what is a show and what is a religious service. Now, of course, there is music, but you go to any evangelical church on a Sunday morning, you will have actually people sometimes sing the hymns that Mr. Feucht wrote. So you have singing, you had a sermon, you had a communion, you had prayers, and you know, it's not only someone singing and worshiping, it's also the congregation. So for us, it's clearly a religious service taking place within a place of worship. So I don't know what jurisdiction, by what authority the city suddenly called that a show and then tried to enforce what kind of liturgy a church can have. I thought we were a country with separation of church and state. We've heard so much about laïcité, for the importance of the state to be religiously neutral. It is supposedly so important that a elementary school teacher cannot wear a visible religious sign. But when it comes to the real deal, to deciding if what happens within a church, within parameters of safety and security, we're not denying that. It seems that the state is not so neutral after all.
Well, it does seem to me that if there's a concern for safety and security, the city of Montreal had police officers there. Were they there to protect the freedom of religion of the people entering the venue, or were they there to protect the protesters outside who were shouting nasty things at the people going inside?
Well, it's certainly ambiguous. I have a contact who was there at the show. Apparently, it was the church members who were doing the security and looking through the bags of the people coming in. The police didn't do that, apparently. They were told to go out from the service from a side door so there would be no confrontation. But yeah, this is what is really concerning, is that you have the state basically anticipating possible crimes like hate speech, and which is very vague in the way they formulate it. And now interrupting a church service is a criminal offense, according to Article 176 of the Criminal Code. And it seems that the person was arrested for entrave. I don't know what the term is in English, but as of today, there were no criminal charges laid on the person interrupting this religious service.
Here is, I think, a text that is illustrative of the people who wanted that event to be canceled. To me, the issue is his MAGA ideology and not so much his so-called Christian views. With the current political situation and our very strained relationship with Trump's MAGA government, we don't want to welcome performers who believe we should be the 51st state. That's what I have a problem with. Thanks for your text, Colleen, but who are you to decide that for anyone? That's my approach. What do you think, Jean-Christophe Jasmin?
Of course. It goes to the heart of the thing. Freedom of expression or freedom of religion is not meant to protect majority views. It is meant to protect minority views or views that can be offensive, disgusting to some people, within the parameters of public order, of course. Like I don't think that freedom of religion should permit someone to make prayers that call for God to smite some ethnic groups. I think this is into it strays
into hate speech.
Yeah. So I'm not saying, sometimes some people are think that, oh, you put the religious shield and then you can do anything. This is not what I'm saying. But freedom of religion and expression, like, recently you had Bloc MPs or PQ MPs who didn't want to swear allegiance to the king when they entered parliament. A few centuries ago, it would have been called high treason. But their, elected MPs can actually discuss republicanism. We can discuss, well, we don't need a king anymore. Like, this is how radical freedom of expression is, in the sense that you can discuss, overturning the monarchy or overturning the regime or making deep change within society. Now, as long as you don't incite violence, as long as you don't cross a certain line, these ideas could be discussed.
One of the things that really struck me, looking at the images and the video of the protesters outside, I thought, okay, go out and protest. If you think he shouldn't be here sharing his MAGA and Christian views, go up and protest. Go picket. Go within your lawful right to protest. Go to it. I am all for that. Some of those people, yes, though, were so-called anti-fascists, yes, who didn't seem to realize that by saying he should not be allowed to speak, they are the ones who are being fascist.
Of course, yes. In the 30s, it was a fascist strategy to actually interrupt communist meetings or political assemblies. Now, many people give a very extended definition of fascism that is kind of self-legitimating any kind of violent acts and stuff like that. So it's a good example. I defend the right of these protesters to protest Mr. Feute and what was happening. Like, you're in a free society. You can say, I'm disgusted by that. I don't like that. But the person who entered the church and threw smoke bombs went beyond the line. And unfortunately, we had a lot of talk on the media, by politicians about, inclusivity and respect. But the fact stays that the only person during Mr. Fuchs' passage in Quebec that went beyond the line were the the people who opposed his performance.
Does the Quebec Evangelical Network think the church should pay the $2,500 fine?
No, I think it's actually a good thing within a bad environment. The bad thing is that actions like that really affect churches. Churches call us and they're saying like, oh, apparently we can't have like worship nights. Is that illegal? Because we did worship nights. There's a confusion about what can be done and cannot be done. And also public servants who watch that, they're like, oh, okay, so like what happened in Quebec City, I can get in trouble for having people with certain political or religious views in the thing I'm managing. So there is a real impact for the church community. But at the same time, it's a good thing, because I think it's like a bank robber that would leave his gun, his wallet, his ID on the counter, and because usually what happens is that you try to rent something, and then suddenly it's not available anymore. But they don't give you any reason, and you know the reason, but they won't be telling you. But in that case, just as in the case with Quebec City, you have public officials saying explicitly that we're banning that because of ideological and religious reasons, basically.
Thank you very much for coming into studio. Jean-Christophe Jasmin, External Affairs Director at the Quebec Evangelical Network.